Welcome to Forgotten Civilization, where we explore the deepest mysteries buried beneath time. Stories of lost worlds, vanished empires, and the origins of humanity's greatest achievements. Today, we begin our journey into the cradle of civilization itself, a place where the first bricks of organized society were laid, where gods and kings walked hand in hand, and where humanity first learned to write its own destiny. This is the story of the Sumerians, the people who, more than 6,000 years ago, transformed chaos into civilization and shaped the foundations of everything we now call modern life. Long before the towering pyramids of Egypt rose from the sands, before the dynasties of China began their march through history, and even before the Indus Valley cities thrived, the Sumerians flourished in a land that would come to be known as Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. It was here, in what is now southern Iraq, that humanity took its first organized steps toward the future. For centuries, this land seemed unremarkable, a vast stretch of plains, scorched by heat, surrounded by desert and marsh. Yet beneath this parched earth lay the ruins of something extraordinary. In the mid-19th century, European explorers and archaeologists began unearthing strange clay tablets covered with wedge-shaped markings, unlike anything seen before. These inscriptions told of great kings, mighty floods, and gods who shaped the destinies of men. At first, many scholars believed they belonged to Babylon or Assyria, powerful empires already known from the Bible and classical records. But as excavations continued in sites like Ur, Uruk, and Eridu, a shocking realization emerged. These tablets were far older than Babylon. They spoke of a forgotten people, one whose language had no known relatives, whose innovations predated every known civilization. The world had rediscovered Sumer, the dawn of recorded human history. The Sumerians appeared around 4500 BCE, though their origins remain shrouded in mystery. Some scholars believe they were indigenous to Mesopotamia, descendants of prehistoric farmers who mastered irrigation and agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. Others suggest they migrated from the east, possibly from the foothills of modern Iran, bringing with them a unique language and culture. Whatever their beginnings, the Sumerians built something entirely new. The first urban society, bound not by tribe or blood, but by cooperation, specialization, and shared belief. Their world was one of city-states, independent, walled cities, each ruled by a local king or priest-king. Among them, Uruk stood supreme. Known in ancient texts as the city of Gilgamesh, Uruk was the first true metropolis on Earth, home to tens of thousands of people, towering ziggurats, and sprawling temples that honored their gods. The rise of Uruk marked a turning point in human history. For the first time, humans lived together in complex societies governed by laws, trade, and shared faith. Farmers cultivated vast fields of barley and wheat using advanced irrigation canals, while craftsmen shaped clay, stone, and metal into tools and art. Merchants carried goods across long distances, exchanging grain, textiles, and precious stones with distant lands. And at the heart of every city stood the temple, the ziggurat, a massive terraced pyramid that reached toward the heavens. These ziggurats symbolized both devotion and power, connecting the earthly and divine realms. Life in Sumer revolved around these sacred centers where priests recorded offerings, interpreted omens, and managed the city's wealth. But what truly set the Sumerians apart, what made them immortal, was their invention of writing. On clay tablets, they pressed reed styluses into soft surfaces to create symbols, pictographs that evolved into abstract signs representing sounds and ideas. This writing system, known as cuneiform, became the foundation of recorded knowledge. It allowed them to document everything: trade transactions, laws, hymns, myths, and astronomical observations. In one moment, humanity stepped from prehistory into history. These tablets are the reason we can still hear the Sumerians' voices today. Among their writings is the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known works of literature, a tale of a mighty king seeking immortality, wrestling with the gods, and learning that true eternity lies not in life itself, but in legacy. Through writing, the Sumerians gave humanity its first collective memory. Their records reveal a society that was astonishingly sophisticated. They created the first known legal systems, established schools to teach scribes, and divided time into measurable units. They observed the heavens, charting stars and planets, creating a lunar calendar to guide their agricultural cycles. They introduced concepts of mathematics and geometry still used today, dividing the circle into 360 degrees, the hour into 60 minutes. These ideas, born thousands of years ago, remain the skeleton of modern science, architecture, and timekeeping. Yet, for all their advancements, the Sumerians were deeply spiritual people. They believed that every aspect of life, from the rise of the sun to the flooding of the rivers, was guided by divine will. Their pantheon was vast and human-like, with gods who could be benevolent or wrathful, wise or vain. Chief among them was An, the god of the heavens, Enlil, lord of the air, and Enki, god of wisdom and water. To appease them, the Sumerians built grand temples, offered sacrifices, and held festivals that celebrated the eternal bond between heaven and earth. Their myths reflected the fragility of human existence, stories of creation, of floods sent to cleanse the world, of mortals shaped from clay to serve divine purpose. These tales would later echo through other civilizations, influencing Babylonian myths, biblical stories, and even Greek legends. To walk through the ruins of Uruk today is to walk through the birthplace of civilization. Beneath layers of dust and time, archaeologists uncover streets, homes, workshops, and temples that tell of a people who understood the power of unity, knowledge, and faith. The Sumerians taught humanity how to organize, how to record, how to build, and how to dream. Their civilization rose and fell, but their influence never died. Every time we tell a story, measure an hour, or seek answers among the stars, we honor them. They were the first, the spark that ignited the fire of human progress. This is only the beginning of their story. In the next part, we'll explore how their myths and gods shaped not just their world, but the beliefs and civilizations that followed, from Babylon to the Bible and beyond. For now, as the sun sets over the ruins of Ur and the shadows of ziggurats stretch across the sands, remember this: everything we are, everything we build, began here, in Sumer, the land that taught humanity how to be civilized. The birth of civilization. As we journey deeper into the world of the Sumerians, we begin to see not just the rise of a people, but the birth of civilization itself, a transformation so profound that it redefined what it meant to be human. The plains of southern Mesopotamia, once wild and unpredictable, became the cradle of social order, architecture, and governance. Around 4000 BCE, the Sumerians began shaping the land into something purposeful. They built levees and canals to harness the rivers, turning floods into fertility and deserts into farmland. This mastery over nature wasn't just practical, it was revolutionary. Agriculture became the foundation of stability, and stability gave birth to surplus. With food abundance came population growth, trade, and the specialization of labor. For the first time in human history, people could devote their lives to something beyond mere survival, to craftsmanship, to leadership, to worship, to art. Each Sumerian city-state became a microcosm of innovation and hierarchy, a living organism with its own heartbeat and identity. Uruk, Kish, Lagash, Ur, Eridu, these names still whisper across millennia, reminders of a world that learned how to organize itself. At the center of each city stood the ziggurat, a monumental tiered temple that soared above the horizon, visible for miles. These were not merely places of worship. They were the heart of the city, the link between heaven and earth. The Sumerians believed that the gods resided atop these structures, watching over humanity. The ziggurat was both an architectural marvel and a spiritual statement, a testament that humans could build bridges to the divine. Around the ziggurat spread a network of homes, markets, workshops, and administrative buildings. Narrow streets wound between mud brick walls, alive with merchants selling grain, wool, and pottery. Children learned the first written words at schools called adubas, where teachers drilled students to carve cuneiform signs into clay. Nearby, priests recorded offerings and astronomical data, while scribes documented the rhythms of trade and law. This complex system required leadership, and so emerged the lugal, or big man, a ruler who embodied both secular and divine authority. These early kings were seen not merely as political leaders, but as chosen intermediaries between gods and men. Governance became divine duty. Law became sacred trust. The Sumerians were also the first to develop structured economies. They created one of the earliest forms of currency, clay tokens representing goods, later marked with cuneiform for accounting. Temples functioned as both religious and economic hubs, redistributing grain and labor across the city-state. Trade routes stretched outward, connecting Sumer with distant lands, the mountains of Iran for metals, the Indus Valley for gems, the Arabian coast for copper and incense. In every direction, the influence of Sumer reached new horizons. Civilization was no longer confined. It was expanding, teaching others the art of complexity. But civilization comes at a cost. As cities grew, so too did competition. Rivalries flared between city-states over land, water, and tribute. Armies began to form, first as militias of farmers defending canals, then as professional soldiers led by kings. The invention of bronze weaponry, another Sumerian contribution, gave these early wars a new, devastating power. Yet through conflict came another innovation: diplomacy. The Sumerians recorded peace treaties, alliances, and trade agreements on clay tablets, proving that civilization was not just about strength, but negotiation and order. The social fabric of Sumer reflected both progress and hierarchy. Society was divided into classes: nobles and priests at the top, merchants and artisans in the middle, farmers and laborers below, and slaves at the base. Women, though often limited in status, still held influence in commerce, religion, and family. Some priestesses commanded respect equal to kings, serving as oracles of the gods. And through every layer of society ran one unifying belief: that the gods had given humans the sacred duty to maintain harmony, to keep the world from descending into chaos. In this harmony between divine order and human ambition, the Sumerians created the first concept of a city, not just as a collection of buildings, but as a symbol of cosmic order. Every brick laid, every canal dug, every prayer offered was part of maintaining the balance between heaven and earth. And this sense of purpose, of civilization as something greater than survival, became the cornerstone of human identity. It is easy to forget that everything we consider essential to civilization, law, government, architecture, writing, education, was first imagined here. The Sumerians didn't just build cities, they built the framework for all societies that followed. Babylon, Assyria, Persia, Greece, Rome, each inherited their model. Even the idea of kingship, of divine right and civic duty began here, under the burning sun of Mesopotamia. The Sumerians had no word for civilization, as we understand it, yet they lived its essence daily. They transformed the chaos of nature into structure, the randomness of life into rhythm, and in doing so, set the stage for the story of humanity itself. As we look back on their legacy, we see not a distant culture, but a reflection of our own world, organized, ambitious, spiritual, and fragile. The Sumerians remind us that civilization is both a triumph and a burden, born from our need to control and to create. Their achievements echo across time, not because they were perfect, but because they were human, visionary and flawed, disciplined and devout, dreamers who built the first blueprint of our shared destiny. This was the birth of civilization, a turning point from which humanity would never return to simplicity. And yet, as we'll see in the next chapter, the Sumerians' most enduring legacy wasn't their buildings or their trade. It was their words, their ideas, and their quest to understand the universe itself. In Part 3, we uncover how the Sumerians mastered knowledge, inventing writing, mathematics, and astronomy that would shape every culture that followed. The mind of the Sumerians. Among the greatest gifts that the Sumerians gave to the world was not a monument of stone, nor a weapon of war, but something far more powerful: the written word. Before Sumer, memory was fragile, bound only to the human voice, fleeting as breath in the wind. With the invention of writing, humanity crossed an invisible threshold. Knowledge could now outlive its creators. The Sumerians, perhaps unknowingly, built the foundation of recorded history, and in doing so, ensured that no idea, no law, no story would ever again depend solely on the fallibility of human recall. It was in the bustling temples and administrative houses of cities like Uruk and Lagash that this transformation began. Priests and scribes, seeking to manage the ever-growing complexity of trade, offerings, and governance, began to mark clay with symbols representing goods: a sack of grain, a herd of sheep, a jar of oil. Over time, these tokens evolved into pictographs, etched with styluses made of reed, pressed into the pliable clay. Thus emerged cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks that would become the script of civilization. At first, these marks were purely practical, a ledger of commerce, a tool of administration. But soon, the Sumerians discovered that writing could do more. It could speak of the gods, record the laws, capture the prayers of kings and the songs of poets. It could give permanence to thought. The clay tablets of Sumer became the libraries of eternity, silent witnesses to the rise of reason. Through these inscriptions we hear the first human voices ever preserved, voices that speak of devotion, justice, fear, and wonder. The oldest known literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh, was born in Sumer. It tells of kings and gods, of mortality and meaning, themes that echo through all of human existence. To read it today is to bridge 5,000 years and touch the soul of our ancestors. The invention of writing did not exist in isolation. It was part of a broader revolution of the human mind. The Sumerians became the first scientists, philosophers, and historians long before those words existed. They observed the heavens with a precision that astonishes even now. They tracked the paths of planets, the phases of the moon, the cycles of the stars, not as idle curiosity, but as divine order to be understood. Their temples doubled as observatories. Their priests were early astronomers. From their calculations arose the concept of the sexagesimal system, the base 60 mathematics we still use today to measure time and angles. When we say a minute has 60 seconds, or a circle has 360 degrees, we are speaking in the language of Sumer. Their mathematical understanding extended beyond the sky. They calculated areas of fields, volumes of containers, and the dimensions of buildings with astonishing accuracy. Some clay tablets even show exercises in algebra and geometry. The Sumerians were not simply counting, they were quantifying their world. They understood that numbers could describe reality, that symbols could model life itself. This was a revolution of abstraction, the birth of scientific thinking. Their measurements and records transformed construction, agriculture, and astronomy, from crafts of intuition into disciplines of calculation. The Sumerians also built the first known schools, called edubas, houses of tablets. Here, young scribes spent years mastering the art of writing and mathematics. The curriculum was rigorous. Students copied proverbs, hymns, and royal decrees until perfection. Punishments for errors were severe. Excellence was demanded. Yet within those walls was the earliest spark of formal education, the recognition that knowledge must be preserved and transmitted, that the mind could be trained as surely as the hand. These schools were the seed of all future academies, libraries, and universities. Their curiosity extended to medicine and law. Clay tablets revealed diagnoses, treatments, and surgical procedures, blending practical observation with spiritual interpretation. They saw illness as both a physical and divine imbalance, to be treated with herbs, rituals, and incantations. Their legal codes, such as the Code of Ur-Nammu, laid down principles of justice centuries before Hammurabi's famous laws. These codes declared rights and punishments, regulated property and marriage, and protected the weak from the strong. The rule of law, as an idea, that society must be governed not by whim, but by written principle, began here, among the Sumerians. But the heart of Sumerian knowledge was their belief in balance, between gods and men, order and chaos, heaven and earth. Their writings reveal a people obsessed with understanding their place in the cosmos. Every equation, every hymn, every record of stars or kings was part of a greater search for meaning. They did not separate science from spirituality. To them, both were paths to truth. The same hand that recorded the movements of Venus also inscribed prayers to Inanna, goddess of love and war. The same clay that bore trade records also carried myths of creation and flood. In the Sumerian world, knowledge was sacred, for it was believed to be a gift of the gods, and to write was to share in divine power. This reverence for learning endured through millennia. When later empires, Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian, rose upon the ruins of Sumer, they inherited its language of symbols and its love of order. Sumerian remained the language of scholarship long after it was spoken in daily life, much as Latin would be in medieval Europe. It became the medium of priests, astronomers, and historians. The torch of knowledge, first lit in Uruk, continued to burn across generations, shaping everything from the zodiac to architecture, from law to literature. And yet, what makes the Sumerians truly extraordinary is not merely their inventions, but their intention, their awareness that ideas could endure. They built with clay, but they dreamed in eternity. Their libraries were not built to glorify kings, but to preserve wisdom. They understood that civilizations may fall, cities may crumble, but knowledge, once written, has the power to transcend time. And so, through the fragile tablets buried in the sands of Mesopotamia, they whisper to us still across 5,000 years. Remember, in every sense, the Sumerians gave humanity its memory. Through them, the past ceased to vanish, the present could be recorded, and the future could learn. Their writings are not relics of a lost age. They are the first heartbeat of human consciousness, the point at which thought became eternal. As we stand at the edge of their legacy, we realize that every book, every digital word, every law, and every scientific theory can trace its lineage to those first impressions in clay. The Sumerians taught us that civilization is not defined by its walls or its wealth, but by its ideas, and the courage to preserve them. And so, as we prepare to explore the next chapter of this ancient story, we move from the written word to the world of faith and myth, to the realm where gods walked among mortals, and the boundaries between heaven and earth were drawn not by rulers, but by belief. Gods, myths, and the spiritual world of Sumer. In the heart of Sumer, beneath the relentless sun and endless horizon of the Mesopotamian plains, the Sumerians looked up at the stars and saw not empty heavens, but a world alive with gods. To them, every force of nature was divine. Every river, every gust of wind, every spark of creation bore the fingerprints of celestial beings. Their cities were not merely centers of trade or governance, but sacred reflections of the heavens themselves. Uruk belonged to Inanna, goddess of love and war. Nippur to Enlil, the lord of wind and authority. Eridu to Enki, god of wisdom and the deep waters. Each city was a cosmic home, a microcosm of divine order, built so that humans could serve and sustain the gods who had birthed them. Religion, in Sumer, was not a matter of faith. It was a covenant of existence. Humanity had been fashioned, according to their oldest myths, to labor for the divine. The gods had shaped men from clay mixed with the blood of a slain deity, infusing life with divine essence but binding it to duty. In the great temples, the ziggurats, towering tiered mountains of brick, this sacred relationship was made visible. These monumental structures, with their stairways rising toward the sky, symbolized humanity's attempt to bridge the gulf between earth and heaven. They were not tombs, like the pyramids of Egypt, but living temples, stairways of devotion where priests ascended daily to commune with the gods, to offer food, wine, incense, and song in exchange for favor and balance. The Sumerian pantheon was vast and complex, mirroring the structure of the cosmos. At its head stood An, the god of the heavens, remote, silent, and supreme. Beneath him was Enlil, his heir and the active force of divine authority, who controlled the winds and decreed the fates of men. Enki, the god of the watery deep and of wisdom, stood apart, a trickster, a creator, and a benefactor to humankind. It was Enki, according to myth, who whispered secrets to men, who taught them crafts, writing, and the arts of civilization. Inanna, radiant and unpredictable, embodied both love and destruction, fertility and war, her duality making her one of the most fascinating figures in ancient myth. To the Sumerians, the gods were not perfect beings of benevolence. They were as capricious, emotional, and conflicted as humanity itself. Their stories were mirrors, reflecting both the beauty and cruelty of the world the Sumerians knew. Floods, droughts, wars, all were seen as echoes of divine moods. In their hymns and epics, the Sumerians revealed a theology of tension between order and chaos, light and darkness, obedience and rebellion. The Epic of Gilgamesh, born from this culture, is more than a tale of adventure. It is a profound meditation on mortality and divine will. Gilgamesh, a king two-thirds divine, seeks immortality and fails. His journey becomes the eternal lesson that even the greatest must bow to death. In his companion, Enkidu, a wild man shaped by the gods and tamed by civilization, we see the Sumerian understanding of the human condition, that knowledge brings both wisdom and sorrow, that civilization is both gift and burden. The flood narrative within the epic, in which the gods, angered by humanity's noise, send a deluge to destroy creation, predates and parallels the later stories found in Hebrew and Babylonian texts. Through these tales, we glimpse how Sumerian thought seeded much of later mythology, religion, and philosophy across the ancient world. But the spiritual life of Sumer was not confined to myth alone. It permeated every layer of existence. The people believed that every object, every craft, every household had its protective deity, a guardian spirit that required honor and respect. Daily rituals, from the lighting of lamps to the baking of bread, were acts of devotion. Temples were economic and social hubs, employing craftsmen, farmers, and musicians in the service of the gods. Religion and administration were intertwined. The temple was the heart of the city's wealth, the keeper of its granaries, and the soul of its law. Priests and priestesses served as mediators between the divine and mortal worlds, interpreting dreams, offering sacrifices, and recording omens on clay tablets. Through the practice of divination, they sought to read the will of the gods in the entrails of animals, in the flight of birds, in the patterns of oil upon water. For the Sumerians, nothing was random. Every sign was a message, every occurrence a divine whisper. The Sumerians also believed deeply in the concept of the me, the sacred laws or powers that governed all aspects of the universe. These were not moral codes, but divine principles of order that dictated everything from kingship and love to music and weaving. According to myth, these me were kept by the gods in the city of Eridu, and when Inanna stole them to bring civilization to Uruk, she bestowed upon humanity the very essence of culture. In this tale lies the Sumerian view of progress, that civilization is divine, but also dangerous, that knowledge, once released, cannot be controlled. It was both a gift and a curse, a theme that echoes even in our modern age. The Sumerians' relationship with their gods was not one of blind worship, but of negotiation. Their prayers were as much appeals as they were bargains. Protect our harvests, and we will build you a temple. Spare us the flood, and we will offer our finest lamb. This pragmatic devotion reveals a worldview grounded in reciprocity, not submission. Humanity and divinity were bound in a cycle of need. Men needed the gods to sustain the world, and the gods needed men to sustain their worship. This idea, simple yet profound, became the spiritual blueprint for countless civilizations that followed. Even death in the Sumerian world was not an escape from duty, but a continuation of the cosmic balance. The afterlife, they believed, was a shadowy realm, a house of dust, where the dead feasted on clay and drank from muddy waters. It was not a place of reward or punishment, but of endurance. The living honored their ancestors with offerings to ease their journey, ensuring that the ties between generations remained unbroken. This somber vision of death speaks to the Sumerian realism, their understanding that immortality lies not in the body but in legacy, in name, in the memory preserved by writing. Through their religion, the Sumerians crafted the first coherent worldview, one that explained creation, destiny, morality, and meaning. They were the first to ask the questions that define us still. Why are we here? What is the nature of life and death? What lies beyond the stars? In their myths, we see the beginnings of philosophy and psychology. In their prayers, the earliest expressions of hope and despair. Their gods may have vanished, their temples long turned to dust, but the questions they asked continue to echo through every culture that followed. In the grand arc of human history, the Sumerians were not only the first builders of cities and inventors of writing, they were the first dreamers of eternity. They saw divinity in the sky, morality in the flood, and destiny in the stars. Their legacy is not simply the clay tablets or the ruins of their ziggurats, but the spiritual architecture of the human mind, the framework that still underlies our sense of purpose and wonder. As we move to the final chapter of this exploration, we will see how the Sumerians' world of gods, kings, and cosmic order came to an end, not with a cataclysm, but with transformation. Their legacy passed like a torch to new civilizations: Babylon, Assyria, Persia, each building upon the foundation laid in Sumer's sacred soil. Their gods may have changed names, their cities may have fallen silent, but the spirit of Sumer endured, quietly shaping the course of all human belief. Decline, legacy, and the echo of Sumery. The twilight of Sumer was not a sudden fall, but a slow fading of brilliance, the long dusk of a civilization that had once illuminated the cradle of humanity. By 2000 BCE, after millennia of innovation and prosperity, the great Sumerian city-states had begun to fracture under the weight of their own ambition. Endless wars between rival kings, Uruk, Lagash, Umma, Kish, drained their strength. The very rivers that had once given life to their fields now brought destruction. The unpredictable flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates, once harnessed by intricate canals, turned against them as soil salinization and over-irrigation poisoned their crops. The land that had once been lush with barley turned white with salt, the harvests thinning year after year. Nature itself seemed to reclaim what men had so carefully built. As the earth hardened, so too did the fortunes of Sumer. The Akkadians to the north, led by the mighty Sargon, rose to power and unified the land under a single rule, absorbing Sumer into the world's first empire. Though the Akkadians adopted Sumerian gods, writing, and laws, their rise marked the beginning of Sumer's end as a distinct civilization. Yet even as they fell politically, the Sumerians triumphed spiritually. Their ideas, their myths, their language endured like buried embers that would ignite again and again through history. In the centuries that followed, Sumer became a memory written in clay, but its influence rippled outward through the ages. The Babylonians inherited their pantheon, transforming Enlil into Marduk, the god of Babylon, and reshaping the Sumerian flood myth into the Epic of Atrahasis, and later, the story of Noah. The Assyrians carried their cuneiform script across empires, their scribes still invoking the wisdom of the Sumerian tongue. Even the Hebrews, Persians, and Greeks would inherit fragments of their cosmic vision. The idea that creation was born from chaos, that gods shaped man from dust, that law itself was divine. Every great civilization that followed in Mesopotamia stood upon Sumer's invisible foundation. Their mathematics, their architecture, their astronomy, all bore the Sumerian signature. The division of the circle into 360 degrees, the 12-month calendar, the 60-minute hour, all these seemingly modern conventions trace their lineage back to Sumer's scholars and priests, who looked to the heavens and measured eternity with numbers. As their temples crumbled, the Sumerians left behind a message that only time could decode. For thousands of years, their language lay silent, their cities buried beneath layers of earth and conquest. It was not until the 19th century, when archaeologists unearthed the ruins of and Lagash, that the world rediscovered the voice of Sumer. The cracked tablets of clay, once dismissed as meaningless relics, began to speak again, telling of gods, kings, trade, poetry, and love. Scholars like Henry Rawlinson, Samuel Noah Kramer, and Leonard Woolley pieced together a forgotten world, letter by letter, revealing that civilization did not begin with Greece or Rome, but in the mud and starlight of ancient Mesopotamia. Each deciphered tablet was like a heartbeat restored, each word a resurrection. In those rediscovered writings, modern humanity glimpsed itself, our beginnings, our fears, our aspirations. The Sumerians had already faced the same questions we wrestle with today: how to govern justly, how to balance technology with nature, how to preserve meaning in a fleeting life. Their story is not simply history, it is prophecy. They show us that every civilization, no matter how advanced, carries within it the seeds of its decline, that the same brilliance which builds cities can blind those who wield it. The fall of Sumer was not merely the end of an age, but the beginning of a pattern that has repeated across millennia, power rising, overreaching, and collapsing under its own weight. Yet from their failure came wisdom, a quiet understanding that endures in every code of law, every written word, every temple built in the image of the heavens. Today the ruins of Ur and Eridu stand silent under the desert sky, their ziggurats eroded by wind and time. Yet beneath that silence lies a deeper echo, the whisper of humanity's first collective dream. The Sumerians taught us to build, to write, to imagine gods, to measure the stars, and to question the unknown. They gave form to the very idea of civilization itself. And though the sands have swallowed their cities, their spirit endures in every language, every belief, every monument humanity has ever raised toward the sky. We are all, in a sense, descendants of Sumer, inheritors of their curiosity, their courage, their longing for eternity. So as we close this journey, remember, the story of Sumer is not a story of the past, but of the eternal present. It is the story of humankind's first awakening, our first attempt to understand the divine, to master the earth, and to leave a mark upon time itself. When we look at the ruins of Sumer, we are not just seeing what was lost, we are witnessing the moment we became human. This has been Forgotten Civilization, where the echoes of our ancestors remind us that history is not gone, it lives within us. If you've traveled with us through the sands of Sumer, don't forget to subscribe and keep the memory of the world's first civilization alive. The past is not silent, it's waiting to be heard again.